Hi, I'd like to introduce you to a new segment on my channel called Sound Bites. This is where I give quick takes on pop culture, things going on in the news, or life in general. Now, if you look through some of the older videos on my channel, you'll see that this is not a completely new segment. I had actually planned to launch this segment back during the COVID quarantine in spring of 2020. And then, like so many of us, I got sidetracked with the quarantine and all that was going on in the world. So I'm relaunching this series, and this is the first video, and I hope you enjoy it. Hi, I just wanted to give some thoughts on this time of year, spring, and some traditions and rituals. One thing I love doing around this time of year is watching some of the old biblical epics around Easter time. I grew up going to Catholic school, and I really enjoy watching the old epics like the Ten Commandments. And for some reason, I don't really like modern biblical movies because they just don't have that element of theater that the older movies have, the Cecil B. DeMille epics like the Ten Commandments. A lot of those movies, they were filmed on obvious sets. I mean, you can tell the backdrops are like matte paintings, and a lot of times in the outdoor scenes, like for example, in the Ten Commandments, you'll see people like riding along in a chariot, and you can tell it's like they're in front of a screen that's projecting the desert of Egypt rather than actually being there. And even though movies of today are more like hyper realistic, I just don't feel that they capture that like grandiose drama and cinematic grandeur that the old biblical epics do. I don't know why that is. But one memory I have of spring is growing up going to Catholic school around age 10. So I would say fourth or fifth grade. My school began showing us Jesus Christ Superstar every Easter time. Now, all of my classmates loved this movie. They just thought it was so cool that this rock opera, that someone had set the story of the gospel to a rock opera. You know, Andrew Lloyd Webber, the very famous playwright and producer of musicals like Cats and Phantom of the Opera. But for some reason, this movie just had an extreme adverse effect on me. Jesus Christ Superstar did. It just traumatized me. It was like watching a horror movie. I didn't understand why someone had set this story to rock music. It just seemed psychedelic and weird. You know, this was the 80s when I was a kid and I was watching this, and the movie was made in or released at least in 1973. Um, and even though my peers loved it and just seemed to really relate to it and thought it was cool, I thought it was horrifying. I mean, for number one, I was just one of a few Black kids in my class. And looking back in retrospect, it's like, okay, they have a Black man playing Judas, the traitor. And even though I think it's cool that they had a Black actor, Carl Anderson, playing a non-traditional role, and that, the movie was diverse in its casting, because a lot of biblical movies are not diverse at all, a lot of the older ones. It was just, in retrospect, it was just weird that they had a Black man playing Judas, and here I am, a young Black boy, in the scene where Judas hangs himself, seeing a Black man swinging from a noose. I mean, now, granted, the people at my school who decided to show us this movie, they had nothing but the best of intentions. They just thought, okay, this movie will appeal to young people and help strengthen their faith. So they had no racist intentions in mind at all when they showed us the movie. But I just found the whole entire movie traumatizing and weird and creepy. Another scene that really disturbed me was when Jesus goes to see King Herod, and King Herod sings this really like off-putting mocking song, like saying, if you're Jesus, walk across my swimming pool. And then after Judas hangs himself, he comes back to haunt Jesus and is dressed in like this fringed disco outfit and has background singers wearing rainbow afro wigs, and it's just so bizarre. And this movie gave me nightmares for weeks at a time after I would see it. So after like a couple years, my mom had to write a note and say that I was not allowed to see this movie anymore. So I would have to sit in a room all by myself while the rest of the class watched the movie. And that in itself was traumatizing, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm in this room by myself while this creepy movie is playing in the next room. There's no one here to protect me if, one of these creepy figures from the movie comes and gets me. I mean, that's how creepy it was to me. At night, I would fear that one of the characters from Jesus Christ Superstar was going to come up the stairs in my house and in my room and get me. And you know what's really weird? One of my first journalism jobs at the African American newspaper, the Call and Post, I was assigned to entertainment. This was in 1993, and one of my first jobs was interviewing Carl Anderson, who played Jesus, when they did a 20-year Broadway revival of the musical, and it came to my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. And when I interviewed Carl Anderson, he was totally cool. When I interviewed him, I said, all due respect to you as an actor, I said, but this movie traumatized me as a kid. I was completely honest with him. And he said, I'm really sorry you had that reaction. I'd love to meet you in person. Why don't you come to our cast party after the show? So I went to the cast party after the show, and opening night, it was in this restaurant called The Vault underneath Huntington Bank in downtown Columbus. And so I met Carl Anderson, and the rest of the cast was there. So I was literally like locked in this room with people who had been in my nightmares as a child. Now, you think that would cure me? You think that was like exposure therapy that would like cure me, because I was an adult by that time. I was in my early 20s. But no, I went home and had even worse nightmares. I'm an artist myself, a filmmaker myself. I would love to see, first of all, someone produce a multicultural musical about the gospel that had modern music, but didn't have that creepy vibe to it that Jesus Christ Superstar does. Maybe that's a project I'll work on. But also, I just wish that as a kid that there are so many movies that are more kid friendly that I wish my school had shown us, like Sound of Music, that has themes about combating discrimination. That would have been way, in my view, way more appropriate to show us than Jesus Christ Superstar. And a few years ago, there was, of course, the live remake of Jesus Christ Superstar on NBC with John Legend, who's an Ohio native like me, playing Jesus. I think that's great. I support John Legend playing that role, but I had no interest in watching it, obviously, because I was so traumatized by it as a kid. And also, I believe Corey Glover, I think his name is, from Living Color, played Judas in a production. So that's cool. I'm glad these Black actors and performers are getting work in this musical, but it personally is just not for me. I'd actually like to add something to this video. After I recorded this video about Jesus Christ Superstar, I remembered something. My very first newspaper job, the one in which I interviewed Carl Anderson, when I was hired full time, I was given an entertainment column, and I had to come up with a name for the column, and I chose What's the Buzz? And that name came from a song in Jesus Christ Superstar. There's a scene where Jesus and the apostles are meeting, and they're singing this song, What's the Buzz? I won't sing any of it because I don't want to pay them and have to pay any royalties to them. And plus, you don't want to hear my singing voice. So I will grudgingly admit that maybe there was some positives that came out of me being exposed to Jesus Christ Superstar.